Sarah Chen stood in the attorney's office, staring at the metal box on the mahogany desk like it might explode. Rust bloomed across its surface in angry orange patches. One corner was dented so badly the metal had folded in on itself. The lock hung broken, barely attached by a single screw that looked ready to give up entirely. "This is it." Her voice came out flat, hollow. "This is what grandfather left me." Attorney Mitchell adjusted his glasses, the kind of nervous gesture people make when delivering news they know will disappoint. He was maybe 50, with graying temples and the cautious manner of someone who'd spent decades managing other people's expectations. "According to Mr. Chen's will, yes. The box and its contents are yours, Miss Chen." Sarah reached across the desk, fingers hovering over the corroded surface before making contact. The metal was cold, rough with decay. She lifted it carefully, expecting weight that wasn't there. The box was surprisingly light, almost empty feeling. Something inside shifted with a soft sound that might have been sand or broken glass or worthless trinkets that had decomposed over decades of neglect. Her hand shook, not from the weight, but from the crushing realization of what this meant. She was 32 years old, $47,000 in debt for medical bills she'd never asked for, 3 months behind on rent, and facing eviction in exactly 2 weeks. Her daughter Emma was 7, brilliant, and completely unaware that they were 14 days from being homeless because her mother couldn't afford a 1-bedroom apartment in a city that had forgotten people like them existed. And grandfather Chen had left her a broken metal box. There must be something else. Sarah set the box down, too hard. It hit the desk with a clang that made Mitchell wince. Property? Savings? Anything? Mitchell opened a folder, reading from documents he'd clearly reviewed multiple times before this meeting. Your grandfather's estate consisted of a rent-controlled apartment in Chinatown, which according to city regulations reverts to the building owner upon his death. His bank accounts have been depleted over the last 5 years, covering medical expenses. What remained, approximately $3,200, went toward funeral costs and estate administration fees. He looked up, genuine sympathy in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Miss Chen. Many families discover that end-of-life care consumes everything." Sarah thought about her own medical debt, about the cancer that had tried to kill her 3 years ago and had settled for bankrupting her instead. She'd survived. Barely. But survival came with a price tag that kept compounding interest, kept sending collection notices, kept reminding her that in America, getting sick was a luxury she couldn't afford. Did he leave a note? Anything explaining why this box matters? Mitchell hesitated, then pulled a single sheet of paper from the folder. The handwriting was shaky, the characters mixing English and Chinese in the way her grandfather had done when he was tired or emotional. Sarah took the letter with hands that had stopped trembling and started going numb instead. "My dearest Sarah, by the time you read this, I will have crossed the river. Don't grieve too long. I lived 93 years, which is more than most men get, more than I deserved after the things I saw, the things I did during the war that I never told anyone about. The box I leave you is broken, like many things in this life. Your grandmother used to say broken things teach us more than perfect ones. I didn't understand until I was old and broken myself. Now I understand everything. Inside you'll find what I could save. It's not much. I'm sorry I couldn't do better. I'm sorry about many things. But most of all, I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. When the sickness came and you fought alone, I should have been there. I was a coward. The box has 2 parts. Most people only see one. You're always clever, Sarah. Cleverer than me. You'll figure out if you need to. And you will need to. The wolves are always at the door. They were at mine. Now they're at yours. Don't let them win. Your grandmother didn't. Neither did I. And neither will you. With love and regret. Grandfather Chen. Sarah read it twice, then a third time, searching for meaning in the careful characters, the spaces between words, the things he hadn't quite said. 2 parts. Most people only see one. She picked up the box again, examining it more carefully. It was roughly 12 inches long, 8 inches wide, maybe 6 inches deep. The kind of military surplus storage container soldiers might have used for personal effects during deployment. The exterior showed decades of wear, rust, and dents and scratches that told stories of rough handling, long storage, neglect. The broken lock caught her attention. It hadn't been forced. The metal around the locking mechanism was intact. This lock had simply given up from age and entropy, the way old things eventually surrendered to time. Sarah opened the lid. Inside, cushioned by deteriorating cloth that might once have been velvet, but had gone gray and threadbare, sat a collection of items that looked like refugees from an estate sale nobody wanted to attend. She lifted them out one by one, setting them on Mitchell's desk while he watched with professional patience that barely masked his pity. A jade pendant, small, carved with what might have been a dragon or might have been abstract swirls. The jade was good quality, translucent green that caught the light, but the silver chain was tarnished black. Maybe worth $200 at a pawn shop, if she was lucky. 3 Chinese coins, old, with square holes in their centers. The kind tourists bought in Chinatown gift shops for $5 each. A pocket watch that no longer ticked, its face cracked, its hands frozen at 3:47. The case was brass, engraved with initials she didn't recognize. RMF. A small leather journal, its pages yellowed and brittle, filled with Chinese characters Sarah could barely read. Her Mandarin had never been strong enough to decipher her grandfather's formal written style. And at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper that crumbled at her touch, a photograph. Black and white, edges worn soft with handling. It showed a young Chinese man in military uniform. Not American military, but something else. He stood beside a Caucasian woman with determined eyes and a gentle smile. Both of them held shovels, standing in what looked like a mine entrance or excavation site. On the back, in her grandfather's younger, steadier handwriting, Burma, 1944. Alaska Day. Sarah stared at the photograph, tried to reconcile the young, strong man in the image with the frail figure she'd visited in the hospital during his final weeks. He'd been so small by then, cancer eating him from the inside the way it had eaten her mother, the way it had tried to eat Sarah herself. 3 generations touched by the same curse. He'd been delirious near the end, speaking in rapid Chinese about mines and treasures, and promises broken. The nurses had assured her this was normal, that dying minds often retreated to memories, especially wartime memories that carried weight no amount of years could lighten. She'd held his hand and said goodbye and walked away thinking she'd never understood him, never connected with him the way she'd wanted to. He'd always been distant, formal, polite, but removed. Like he was living behind glass that let him see out but kept everyone else from seeing in. Miss Chen. Mitchell's voice pulled her back to the present. Is there anything else you need? I have another appointment in 15 minutes. Sarah looked at the pathetic collection on his desk. Maybe $500 total if she was lucky. $47,000 in debt. $1,800 rent due. Emma's school supplies, groceries, utilities, medicine. The endless math of poverty that never quite added up no matter how carefully she calculated. No. She began gathering the items, placing them back in the box with more care than they probably deserved. Nothing else. She left the attorney's office carrying the box under one arm like a football, walking through downtown Seattle in afternoon drizzle that matched her mood perfectly. Gray, persistent, inescapable. The bus ride home took 40 minutes, long enough for Sarah to spiral through every worst-case scenario her anxiety could manufacture. Homeless shelters. Sleeping in her 12-year-old Honda. Emma's face when Sarah explained they had to leave their apartment. The judgment in her daughter's second-grade teacher's eyes when Emma showed up wearing the same clothes 3 days running. Their apartment was in Beacon Hill, a neighborhood that was gentrifying aggressively around them while they clung to their rent-controlled unit like survivors on a life raft watching the ship sink. The building was old, maintained just enough to pass inspection, home to immigrants and working poor and people like Sarah who'd once had prospects but had discovered that prospects didn't pay bills when real life happened. Emma was at their neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment, where she went after school on days Sarah worked late. Sarah could hear her daughter's laughter through the thin walls as she climbed the stairs to their third-floor unit. The sound was pure, uncomplicated by adult worries. Sarah wanted to preserve that innocence for as long as possible, even though she knew time was running out. She unlocked their door, 2 deadbolts and a chain, because this neighborhood had gotten rougher as rents rose and people got more desperate, and stepped into the cramped space that had been home for 5 years. One bedroom that Emma had. Sarah slept on the pull-out couch in the living room. Kitchenette with appliances that worked most of the time. Bathroom where the toilet ran constantly and the shower temperature fluctuated between scalding and freezing with no middle ground. But it was theirs. Until 2 weeks from now, when the eviction notice expired and marshals would come to physically remove them if they hadn't left voluntarily. Sarah set the metal box on her second-hand coffee table and stared at it. Broken. Worthless. The sum total of her grandfather's legacy. She should have been angry. Should have felt betrayed. Instead, she just felt tired. Bone-deep exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical labor and everything to do with the grinding stress of never having enough, of always falling short, of fighting battles she knew she couldn't win, but having to fight anyway, because giving up meant her daughter suffered. Don't let them win, her grandfather had written. Easy advice from a dead man who'd left her nothing to fight with. Sarah opened the box again, removing the contents piece by piece. She needed to know what she had, needed to calculate whether selling these items could buy even a few more days. Every day mattered. Every dollar mattered. She learned to think in terms of survival math. This pendant equals 3 days of food. These coins equal 1 tank of gas. This watch equals Emma's school lunch money for a week. She examined the jade pendant first, holding it up to the lamplight. The carving was intricate, definitely dragon-shaped now that she looked closer. The beast coiled around itself, mouth open, teeth bared. Chinese dragons were symbols of power, wisdom, good fortune. This one looked fierce, protective. The jade was translucent in the light, good quality, probably Qing dynasty if she had to guess. Sarah had worked briefly at an antique shop during college, before medical school, before cancer, before her entire life trajectory had changed. She remembered enough to know quality when she saw it. This pendant might fetch $300 from the right buyer, not the $200 she'd initially estimated. The coins were harder to evaluate. She photographed them with her phone, ran a reverse image search. The results came back with prices ranging from $15 for reproductions to $500 for genuine antique examples. Without expertise, she couldn't tell which category these fell into. The pocket watch was clearly broken, but the engraving suggested it had been important to someone. RMF, not her grandfather's initials. She opened the case, checking for additional markings. The interior backplate was scratched, worn, but she could make out faint characters. Yangon, 1943. Yangon, Burma. The same location as the photograph. Sarah set down the watch and picked up the photo again, studying it with new attention. Her grandfather, young, maybe 25. The white woman beside him, similar age, capable-looking, dressed in practical work clothes that suggested physical labor. Both holding shovels. Standing at what was definitely a mine entrance, she could see the timber supports, the darkness beyond, the equipment scattered around them. Burma in 1944 had been a war zone. Japanese occupation. Allied resistance. Her grandfather had been part of something during that time, but he'd never spoken about it. The few times Sarah had asked as a child, he'd changed the subject or left the room. Some doors stayed locked. Her grandmother had explained. Best not to try forcing them open. The journal might hold answers. Sarah opened it carefully, the binding cracking softly in protest. The pages were rice paper, delicate, covered in elegant Chinese characters that made her wish desperately that she'd paid more attention during the weekend Chinese school classes her mother had insisted on. She could make out some characters. Mine, treasure, war, betrayal, promise. But connecting them into coherent sentences was beyond her current skill level. Sarah pulled out her phone, opened a translation app, and began photographing pages. The app struggled with her grandfather's handwriting, offering nonsensical translations that clearly missed context and nuance. She'd need a proper translator, which cost money she didn't have. Mom! Sarah jumped. Emma stood in the doorway, backpack still on her shoulders, eyes. curious and concerned in the way only 7-year-olds managed, pure worry without the armor adults built to hide it. "Hey, baby." Sarah closed the journal quickly, forced a smile that probably didn't reach her eyes but was the best she could manage. "I didn't hear you come in. Mrs. Rodriguez walked me over. She said you looked sad this morning." Emma dropped her backpack and climbed onto the couch next to Sarah, small body warm against her mother's side. "What's that?" "Things from great-grandfather Chen. He passed away, remember?" Emma nodded solemnly. She'd met him only a handful of times. He'd been kind but distant, the way he was with everyone, offering hard candies and careful smiles, but never quite connecting. Emma had called him the ghost man because he seemed to be only halfway present, 1 foot already across whatever bridge the dead eventually crossed. "Is it treasure?" Emma reached for the jade pendant, her child's eye seeing beauty where Sarah saw dollar signs. "Not really, just old things." Sarah watched her daughter examine the jade, turning it in the light, tracing the dragon's carved scales with one finger. "It's pretty, like from story." Emma held it up, letting the light shine through the translucent stone. "The dragon looks mad. Protective, maybe. Dragons guard things in Chinese stories." "What was it guarding?" "Good question." Sarah took the pendant back, placed it carefully in the box. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe nothing. Maybe it's just decoration." Emma picked up the photograph next. "Who's that with great-grandfather?" "I don't know that either. They look happy, like they're about to find something good." Sarah looked at the image again, seeing what Emma saw. Yes, they did look happy, or at least hopeful, which in 1944 Burma must have been a rare and precious thing. Whatever they'd been digging for, they'd believed it mattered. Believed enough to smile for a camera in the middle of a war zone. "Why don't you go start your homework?" Sarah suggested. "I need to figure out what to do with all this." After Emma retreated to the bedroom, Sarah sat alone with her grandfather's effects, feeling the weight of his absence in a way she hadn't at the funeral. He was really gone, and he'd left her this puzzle she couldn't solve, this broken box with items that raised more questions than they answered. The box has 2 parts. Most people only see one. Sarah examined the box's interior more carefully. The gray cloth lining was glued down, covering the metal walls. She ran her fingers along the seams, pressing gently, searching for anything unusual. The cloth was deteriorating, coming loose in places, revealing the metal underneath. There, at the bottom, near one corner, the cloth felt different. Thicker maybe, or layered. Sarah pressed harder and felt something shift beneath the fabric. Her heart rate picked up, adrenaline cutting through the exhaustion. She grabbed a butter knife from the kitchenette and carefully worked it under the loose cloth, prying up the glued-down fabric. It came away easily, decades-old adhesive surrendering without much fight. Underneath, the metal bottom looked normal at first. Plain gray steel, spotted with surface rust. But as Sarah cleared away more cloth, she noticed something odd. The box's interior depth didn't match its exterior height. There was at least an inch of space unaccounted for. A false bottom. Sarah's hand shook as she pressed on the metal, searching for a release mechanism. Modern hidden compartments use springs or magnets, but this box was old, military, utilitarian. Whatever mechanism existed would be simple, mechanical, designed to work even after decades of neglect. She found it along the sidewall, a small raised section, barely noticeable, that when pressed down caused the entire bottom panel to shift upward slightly. Sarah worked her fingers into the gap and lifted. The false bottom came away, revealing a second compartment hidden beneath the first. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth that had protected them from moisture and time, were 3 items that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. The first was a leather document folder, sealed with wax that had somehow remained intact. She set it aside, knowing instinctively it was important but wanting to see everything before examining details. The second was a small wooden box, maybe 4 inches square, carved with intricate patterns. She opened it, and her hands went numb. Gemstones, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, loose in the box. They caught the lamplight and threw it back in colors that didn't seem natural. Deep reds, brilliant blues, vibrant greens, colors so intense they looked artificial. But these weren't artificial. Sarah might not know much about gems, but she knew these were real. The third item was a folded map, brittle with age, showing what looked like mountain terrain with markers and Chinese characters scattered across the surface. One location was circled heavily, marked with characters Sarah could translate. The prize. Sarah sat frozen, the wooden box of gems in her lap, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. This wasn't possible. People didn't find treasure in dead relative storage boxes. That was movie plot, fantasy, the kind of thing that happened to other people in other lives, not to broke single mothers drowning in debt. She picked up one of the stones with shaking fingers. It was roughly cut, not faceted like modern jewelry, but the color was unmistakable. Deep red, like blood lit from within. A ruby, unless she was completely wrong, and she was praying desperately that she wasn't wrong. How many stones were in this box? Sarah started counting, but gave up at 50. Too many. Too valuable. Too impossible. Her phone buzzed. Text from the property management company. Final notice before eviction proceedings. 14 days. Time was up. They were done being patient. She needed to pay $5,400 in back rent plus late fees, plus this month's rent, or they were filing. Sarah looked from the phone to the box of gems and felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Not hope exactly. Hope was too fragile. This was something harder, sharper. Determination mixed with fury. Her grandfather had hidden this treasure for a reason. Had kept it secret for 70 years. Had left her clues, cryptic instructions, a trail to follow if she was clever enough. Don't let them win, he'd written. Sarah opened the document folder carefully. The wax seal cracked, brittle with age. Inside were papers written in both English and Chinese, what looked like contracts or agreements, names she didn't recognize, date for 1944 and 1945, and one phrase repeated multiple times that even her limited Chinese could translate: the Mogok Prize. Secured against future need. To be claimed only in desperation. Mogok. Sarah had heard that name before. Mogok, Burma. The Valley of Rubies. One of the world's most famous gem-producing regions. Source of the finest rubies on Earth. The kind that sold at auction for millions. Per carat. Her grandfather had worked in the Mogok mines during the war. Had somehow secured these gems. Had hidden them for 70 years. And now, in her moment of desperation, he'd left them to her. Sarah's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the box. She set it carefully on the table, pressing her palms flat against her thighs, trying to control the trembling that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the sudden violent shift from drowning to maybe, possibly, surviving. She needed to verify this. Needed an expert who could tell her these weren't colored glass or synthetic stones. Needed authentication, appraisal, documentation. But more than anything, she needed to stay quiet. Her grandfather had hidden this fortune for 70 years. There had to be a reason beyond simple eccentricity. The documents mentioned secured against future need. Secured from whom? Protected from what? The cryptic warning about wolves at the door suggested danger. Suggested people who might come looking if they knew what existed. Emma emerged from the bedroom. Homework already finished because she was brilliant and efficient in ways that broke Sarah's heart. Mom, I'm hungry. Can we have dinner? Sarah closed the box quickly, placed it back in the false bottom, covered it with the oilcloth, replaced the false bottom panel, and smoothed the deteriorating cloth lining back into place. The transformation took less than 30 seconds. Anyone looking at the box now would see only the worthless items in the upper compartment. Spaghetti okay? With meatballs. Sarah calculated rapidly. Meatballs meant $4 more at the grocery store. They had maybe $30 to last until Friday when her paycheck deposited. But Emma loved meatballs, and Sarah had just discovered what might be a fortune in rubies, and saying yes felt important somehow. A small defiance against the poverty that had controlled every decision for so long. With meatballs, Emma's smile was worth every cent. While pasta boiled and sauce simmered and Emma chattered about her day at school, Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. She needed an appraiser, but who? Taking the gems to a commercial jewelry store felt dangerous. Those places had security cameras, records, and potentially connections to people who'd ask questions Sarah didn't want to answer. She needed someone independent, discreet, trustworthy. Someone who could authenticate the stones without broadcasting their existence to the world. After dinner, after Emma was asleep, Sarah sat on the couch with her laptop and began researching. Graduate gemologists, independent appraisers, auction houses. The top results all felt too corporate, too official, too likely to trigger whatever protection mechanisms her grandfather had feared. Then she found Dr. Patricia Yuen, Chinese-American gemologist, taught at the University of Washington, specialized in Asian antique jewelry and conflict gems, stones with complicated histories from war zones and disputed territories. Her faculty page mentioned research into World War II-era gem trafficking and the black market that had operated around Burma's ruby mines during Japanese occupation. Perfect. Maybe too perfect. Sarah drafted an email 3 times before sending it. Professional but vague, mentioning inherited items that needed authentication, requesting a private consultation. She hit send at midnight and tried not to think about what she'd do if Dr. Yuen said no, or worse, if the gems turned out to be worthless. The response came at 7:30 a.m. Brief, professional. I can meet Thursday at 2 p.m. My office. Bring the items. Thursday, 2 days away. Sarah could survive 2 more days of not knowing, of carrying this secret that felt simultaneously like salvation and like a bomb waiting to explode. She went to work Tuesday morning at the medical billing office where she processed insurance claims for $19 an hour. The job was mind-numbing but stable, and stability mattered when you were drowning. Her coworkers were pleasant enough. The work was straightforward, and nobody asked questions about why she brown-bagged lunch or why she wore the same 5 outfits in rotation. Her supervisor, Angela, stopped by Sarah's cubicle mid-morning. "Hey, Chen, got a minute?" Sarah's stomach dropped. She knew that tone. That was the "we need to talk" tone that preceded bad news. Angela's office was small, cramped, decorated with motivational posters that felt more threatening than inspiring. She gestured to a chair, and Sarah sat, hands folded in her lap, preparing for whatever blow was coming. "I wanted to give you a heads up before the official announcement." Angela's expression was professionally sympathetic. The company's restructuring. They're outsourcing medical billing to a contractor in the Philippines. It's a cost-cutting measure. Everyone in this department is being laid off effective March 31st. That's 6 weeks from now. 6 weeks. Sarah's vision tunneled. 6 weeks until she lost her $19 an hour job, lost her health insurance, lost the thin thread of stability keeping her and Emma from complete collapse. "There's a severance package," Angela continued. 2 weeks' pay plus accrued vacation time. It's not much, but it's something, and I'm happy to provide references. 2 weeks' pay, maybe $1,500 after taxes. That would cover 1 month's rent if she wasn't already 3 months behind. Sarah thanked Angela with a voice that didn't shake, walked back to her cubicle with legs that moved on autopilot, and spent the rest of the day processing insurance claims while her mind screamed static. That evening, sitting on her couch with the metal box on the coffee table and Emma asleep in the bedroom, Sarah opened the hidden compartment again and stared at the gems that might be real or might be costume jewelry that looked real enough to fool desperate people. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. Thursday arrived wrapped in Seattle's perpetual gray drizzle. Sarah called in sick to work, the first time she'd done so in 18 months, and immediately felt guilty despite everything. The Protestant work ethic her mother had drilled into her didn't care that she might be sitting on a fortune. Missing work felt like failure. She dropped Emma at school, watching her daughter's backpack disappear through the doors, then sat in her Honda for 10 minutes, trying to control the anxiety that made her hands shake against the steering wheel. The metal box sat in a canvas grocery bag on the passenger's seat, innocuous, containing either salvation or more disappointment to add to the pile. Dr. Patricia Yuen's office was in the geology building, 3rd floor, corner suite with windows overlooking the campus quad. Sarah found it after getting lost twice in hallways that all looked identical, her nerves making navigation difficult. The door was open. Sarah knocked anyway, polite conditioning overriding the urgency thrumming through her veins. "Come in." The voice was warm, professional, belonging to a woman in her mid-50s with silver-streaked black hair, pulled into a practical bun. She wore a white lab coat over casual clothes, and her desk was organized chaos. Papers everywhere, but clearly in some system only she understood. Dr. Yuan stood, offering her hand. "You must be Sarah Chen. Please sit." Sarah sat in the chair across from the desk, the canvas bag heavy on her lap. Now that she was here, she didn't know how to begin. "How did you tell someone you might have found a fortune in war-era rubies without sounding insane?" Dr. Yuan seemed to sense her hesitation. "Your email mentioned inherited items needing authentication. Items from the 1940s, you said. Burma? My grandfather's. He died 3 weeks ago. Left me a box." Sarah's voice steadied as she spoke. "Just facts. Stick to facts. I found a hidden compartment. Inside were gemstones and documents that reference Mogok." Dr. Yuan's expression sharpened, professional interest replacing polite courtesy. "May I see them?" Sarah lifted the canvas bag onto the desk and removed the metal box. She opened it, removed the worthless items from the top compartment, then worked the hidden release and lifted out the false bottom. The wooden box of gems sat in her palm, small enough to hold, but heavy with possibility. She sat on Dr. Yuan's desk and opened the lid. The gemologist went very still. Her hand moved slowly, almost reverently, toward the stones, then stopped. "May I?" Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Dr. Yuan put on white cotton gloves and picked up a large red stone, holding it to the light from her desk lamp. She examined it for a long moment, then reached for a jeweler's loupe, studying the gem with an intensity that made Sarah's heart pound. "Where exactly did your grandfather get these?" "I don't know the full story. He worked in the Mogok mines during the war. Japanese occupation. There are documents that mention securing something called the Mogok Prize against future need." Dr. Yuan set down the ruby, because that's what it was. Sarah could see it in the woman's careful handling, her focused attention, and picked up a blue stone, then a green one, then another red one. Each received the same careful examination, the same measured attention. After what felt like an hour, but was probably 10 minutes, Dr. Yuan set down the loupe and looked at Sarah with an expression that was difficult to read. Professional neutrality fighting against something else. Shock, maybe, or concern. "Miss Chen, do you understand what you have here? I was hoping you could tell me." Dr. Yuan pulled out her phone and took several photographs of individual stones, then opened a laptop and began typing rapidly. "I need to run these images through some databases, verify what I'm seeing. But preliminary assessment." She paused, choosing words carefully. "These appear to be genuine natural gemstones from the Mogok region. Rubies, sapphires, some emeralds. Uncut or minimally processed, which is consistent with wartime extraction. And if they're what I think they are, they're extremely valuable." Sarah's mouth had gone dry. How valuable? That depends on several factors. Quality, size, provenance, legal status. Dr. Yuan's fingers moved across her keyboard, pulling up images, comparing them to the stones on her desk. "But rough calculation, assuming these are genuine Mogok rubies from the 1940s with clean provenance, you're looking at potentially $6 to $8 million. The number hit Sarah like a physical blow. She actually swayed in her chair, grip tightening on the armrest to keep from falling. However, Dr. Yuan continued, her tone becoming more serious. "There are significant complications. Gemstones from Burma during the Japanese occupation exist in a legal gray area. Many were looted, stolen, or extracted under forced labor. There are international regulations regarding conflict gems, and provenance matters enormously. These stones can't just be sold on the open market without documentation proving they were obtained legally." Sarah found her voice, though it came out weak. "The documents. There are contracts or agreements in the hidden compartment. Would those help?" "Let me see them." Sarah handed over the leather folder. Dr. Yuan opened it carefully, examining the papers with the same attention she'd given the gems. Her expression grew more complex as she read, switching between documents, comparing dates and names. "This is extraordinary," she finally said. According to these contracts, your grandfather was part of a joint operation between Allied intelligence and local Burmese resistance. They were securing valuable resources, including these gems, to prevent them from falling into Japanese hands. Everything here suggests legal acquisition as part of a military operation. There are signatures from British and American officers, documentation of transport, even authentication certificates from the period. She looked up at Sarah. If these documents are genuine, and I need a historian to verify that, then you have clean provenance. These gems were legally secured during wartime, held by your grandfather under authorization, and are now your legitimate inheritance. Sarah's mind was reeling, trying to process numbers that didn't make sense in the context of her life. $6 to $8 million. That wasn't real. That was fantasy money, the kind of amount that existed only in lottery winners' lives, not in the lives of medical billing clerks facing eviction. But Dr. Ewan said, and Sarah's heart sank because there was always a but. There's another complication. These aren't just valuable gemstones. According to these documents, this collection was known as the Mogok Prize, a specific cache that several different organizations were fighting over during and after the war. If word gets out that you have this collection, you're going to attract attention from people you don't want attention from. What kind of people? Collectors who don't care about legal niceties. Governments who might claim these stones belong to Myanmar as national treasures. Other families who might dispute your grandfather's right to hold them. And potentially criminal organizations with historical interests in Asian gemstone trafficking. Dr. Ewan leaned forward. Miss Chen, I need to ask you something very important. Does anyone else know about these stones? No, just me. And now you. Good. Keep it that way. Dr. Ewan pulled out a business card and wrote several numbers on the back. I'm going to help you, but we need to be very careful. I know people who can handle a collection like this, legitimate auction houses, private dealers who work with high-value conflict gems. But the process will take time. Months, possibly a year. And it has to be done quietly. I don't have months. The words burst out before Sarah could stop them. I'm being evicted in 12 days. I just lost my job. I have a 7-year-old daughter and $47,000 in medical debt, and I can't wait a year for careful processes and proper channels. Dr. Yuan's expression softened with understanding. I know it seems urgent, but if you try to sell these stones quickly through improper channels, you'll either get a fraction of their value or attract exactly the kind of attention that will destroy you. Trust me on this. Sarah closed her eyes, fighting down panic that threatened to overwhelm her careful control. She thought finding the gems solved everything. Instead, she'd just discovered a new, impossible situation. Sitting on millions while facing eviction. Surrounded by salvation she couldn't access. However, Dr. Ewan continued, there is one option for immediate liquidity. I can connect you with a private lender who specializes in gem-backed loans. You put up the collection as collateral. They give you a cash advance, usually 20 to 30% of appraised value, and you have time to arrange proper sale through legitimate channels. The interest rates are high, but it gives you breathing room. 20 to 30% of $6 million was still over $1 million. More money than Sarah had ever imagined having. More than enough to solve every immediate problem and most long-term ones. How quickly could something like that happen? If I make calls today, you could have cash in your account by next week. Dr. Ewan pulled out her phone. But Sarah, listen to me carefully. These people are legitimate, but they're also hard-nosed business people. If you default on the loan, they take the collateral and you get nothing. Don't agree to anything you can't follow through on. I understand. Sarah heard her voice say the words, heard herself agreeing to something she didn't fully understand, propelled by desperation and the impossible math of her situation. Dr. Ewan made 3 phone calls while Sarah sat in the chair, trying to breathe steadily, trying to believe this was actually happening. The conversations were brief, professional, full of terminology Sarah didn't understand, but could sense the weight of. When Dr. Ewan hung up after the 3rd call, her expression was cautiously optimistic. Richard Castellano. He's a private lender in San Francisco who specializes in high-value gem transactions. Very discreet, very professional, completely legitimate. I've worked with him before on other estates. He's willing to fly up tomorrow to examine the collection personally and make an offer. Tomorrow. Sarah's hands were shaking again. What do I need to do? Bring everything. The gems, the documents, anything related to your grandfather's acquisition of the collection. Richard will do his own authentication and appraisal, then make a loan offer. If you accept, his lawyers will draw up contracts. The gems go into secure storage as collateral, and you receive funds transfer within 24 hours. It sounded too easy. Everything in Sarah's life had taught her that nothing was ever easy, that every solution came with hidden costs and unexpected complications. But what choice did she have? Wait for careful processes while she and Emma got evicted? Watch the sheriff padlock their apartment door in 11 days while she sat on millions in gems she couldn't legally sell quickly? Set up the meeting. Dr. Ewan nodded and made another call, speaking briefly with someone on the other end. When she hung up, she scribbled an address on a notepad. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., this location. It's a private office Richard uses for these kinds of transactions. Bring everything. And Sarah, she looked up, expression serious. Be careful. You're about to enter a world most people never see. High-stakes gem dealing attracts people who play for keeps. Trust no one completely, not even Richard. And for God's sake, don't tell anyone else about this until everything is finalized. Sarah took the address, put the gems back in their hidden compartment, sealed the metal box, and left Dr. Ewan's office in a daze. She sat in her Honda for 20 minutes in the parking lot, staring at nothing, trying to process the violent shift from drowning to maybe surviving. $6 to $8 million. She pulled out her phone and calculated. After the loan at 25%, she'd have approximately $1. $5 million. Pay off the $47,000 in medical debt. Pay the $5,400 in back rent. Put aside money for first and last month's rent on a new apartment. Something better, somewhere Emma didn't have to hear neighbors fighting through thin walls. Buy a reliable car. Set aside college money. Maybe even think about going back to school herself, finishing the medical degree cancer had interrupted. The possibilities made her dizzy. She picked up Emma from school, watching her daughter run across the playground toward the car, backpack bouncing, face bright with uncomplicated joy. Emma climbed into the passenger seat. Technically illegal, but Sarah's Honda was too old to have functioning airbags anyway, and immediately launched into a detailed account of her day. And then Lucas said that dragons aren't real, but I told him they're real in China. And Miss Peterson said we're both right, because they're real in stories and stories matter just as much as reality. And then we did math, and I got all the problems right. And can we have pizza for dinner? Sarah looked at her daughter's expectant face and made a decision that probably wasn't financially responsible but felt necessary anyway. Yeah, baby, we can have pizza. They ordered from a cheap place that had a 2-for-1 deal and ate while watching cartoons on their old television that had a line of dead pixels across the bottom but still worked well enough. Emma chattered about school and friends and a book she was reading about a girl who found a magic door to another world. Sarah listened with half her attention, the other half spinning through tomorrow's meeting, calculating risks, worrying about complications she couldn't predict. After Emma was asleep, Sarah opened her laptop and began researching Richard Castellano. The results were sparse but legitimate. A few mentions in gem industry publications, a professional website with minimal information, some references and articles about estate jewelry, and conflict gem certification. Nothing that screamed danger, but nothing that provided complete reassurance either. She found an article from 5 years ago about Mogok rubies, discussing their value and the complicated history of gems from that region. One paragraph caught her attention. The so-called Mogok Prize remains one of the great mysteries of wartime gem trafficking. A collection of exceptional rubies and sapphires secured by Allied intelligence in 1944, the prize disappeared after the war and has never been recovered. Estimates place its value at over $200 million by today's standards, though without examination, exact worth remains speculative. Sarah's vision blurred. $200 million. Dr. Ewan had said $6 to $8 million. Either the article was wildly inflating the value, or Dr. Ewan had severely underestimated. She clicked deeper, finding more references. An academic paper about wartime resource extraction, a blog post by a gem historian. Each mention of the Mogok Prize increased the estimated value. $150 million. $300 million. One source claimed $500 million, though that seemed fantastical. Why had Dr. Ewan lowball the estimate? Professional caution, perhaps. Now wanted to get Sarah's hopes up before proper authentication. Or maybe the actual collection was smaller than the legendary prize, just part of it rather than the whole thing. Or maybe Dr. Ewan knew exactly what she was looking at and had reasons for downplaying the value. Sarah closed the laptop, suddenly exhausted. Paranoia was easy when you had something valuable. Everyone became a potential threat. She couldn't afford to second-guess every interaction, couldn't survive if she started seeing conspiracies in every shadow. Dr. Ewan had been professional, helpful, offering solutions when Sarah needed them desperately. Tomorrow she'd meet Richard Castellano, get an independent appraisal, and make an informed decision. That was all she could do. Control what she could control, handle one step at a time, survive until the next crisis. The next morning crawled past with agonizing slowness. Sarah went through motions at work, processed insurance claims with autopilot efficiency while her mind was completely elsewhere. Her supervisor, Angela, stopped by her cubicle at lunch. "Hey, you feeling better? You look rough on Tuesday." Sarah had forgotten she'd called in sick yesterday. The lie felt distant, disconnected from current reality. "Yeah, just a 24-hour thing. I'm fine now." Angela's expression suggested she didn't entirely believe this, but she didn't push. "Okay, well, take care of yourself. This restructuring is stressful for everyone. If you need to talk, I'm here." After Angela left, Sarah's coworker Marcus leaned around his cubicle divider. "You really okay? You seem distracted." "I'm fine. Just family stuff. Not entirely a lie. Grandfather dying, inheriting his secrets that qualified as family stuff. If you need anything, let me know." Marcus meant it sincerely, and Sarah felt a pang of guilt for all the deception. But what was she supposed to say? "Actually, I might be sitting on hundreds of millions in conflict gems, and I'm terrified and exhilarated and have no idea what I'm doing." She left work at 1, claiming a dental appointment, and drove to the address Dr. Ewan had given her. It was in downtown Seattle, an older building that had been expensively renovated, the kind of place that looked understated but cost a fortune in rent. The directory in the lobby showed mostly law offices and financial consultants. Suite 412 had a plain door with no name, just a number. Sarah knocked. The man who answered was in his early 60s, silver-haired, dressed in an expensive suit that fit perfectly. His handshake was firm, his smile professional but not warm. Everything about him screamed competence and careful control. "Miss Chen, I'm Richard Castellano. Please come in." The office was furnished like a lawyer's suite. Leather chairs, mahogany desk, bookshelves with leather-bound volumes that had probably never been opened. But the equipment on the desk betrayed its real purpose. High-powered microscopes, calibrated scales, spectrometers, all the tools of professional gemology arranged with careful precision. Another person stood by the window. A woman, younger than Richard, maybe 40, dressed similarly in expensive professional attire. Her expression was neutral, assessing. "This is my associate, Jennifer Wu," Richard said. "She handles documentation and legal issues. Everything we discuss here is confidential, covered by attorney-client privilege, even though I'm not technically your attorney. Complete discretion is part of the service I provide." Sarah sat in the offered chair, the metal box once again in her lap. She was getting tired of this performance. Opening the box, revealing the compartments, explaining her grandfather's role in securing the gems. But Richard and Jennifer listened with focused attention, asking clarifying questions, taking notes. When Sarah finally placed the wooden box of gems on Richard's desk and opened it, both of them leaned forward with barely concealed interest. "May I?" Richard asked, already reaching for white gloves. The examination took over an hour. Richard worked with methodical precision, examining each stone individually, recording observations, comparing gems to reference materials he pulled from a locked case. Jennifer photographed everything, documented the process, cross-referenced the contracts and provenance documents against what appeared to be extensive databases on her laptop. Sarah sat in silence, watching, anxiety building with each passing minute. The careful attention, the thoroughness of their examination, it all suggested these stones were even more valuable than Dr. Ewan had indicated. Finally, Richard set down his loupe and looked at Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Miss Chen, are you aware of what you actually have here?" Dr. Ewan said possibly 6 to 8 million in value. Richard and Jennifer exchanged a glance. Something passed between them, some communication Sarah couldn't interpret. "Patricia Ewan is an excellent gemologist," Richard said carefully. "But she's also very conservative in her estimates, and she may not have recognized the full significance of this collection." He gestured to the stones spread across his desk. "This isn't just valuable. This is the Mogok Prize. The actual prize. The collection that multiple governments and private collectors have been searching for since 1946. Sarah's heart was hammering. "How much?" "In the current market, properly authenticated and sold through appropriate channels, I estimate the total value at approximately $289 million. The number didn't register at first. Sarah's brain rejected it as impossible, too large to comprehend. $289 million. That couldn't be real. That was national GDP money, lottery winner money, money that existed in completely different reality from her life. Jennifer spoke for the first time, her voice crisp and professional. "However, selling a collection of this magnitude requires extreme care. The market can only absorb so much at once. Flooding it with hundreds of stones would depress prices. Proper liquidation would take 3 to 5 years, using a combination of private sales, select auction placements, and strategic dealer relationships. I don't have 3 to 5 years." Sarah's voice came out strangled. "I need money now. Today. This week." Richard nodded understanding, which is why the loan structure makes sense. "Here's what I'm prepared to offer. $75 million secured loan against the full collection as collateral. That's roughly 26% of total appraised value, which is generous for this kind of arrangement. Interest rate of 8% annually. Loan term of 5 years, during which time I'll handle the gradual sale of the collection through optimal channels. After expenses and fees, you should net approximately $220 million total." Sarah's ears were ringing. $75 million. She thought $1. $5 million was life-changing. This was beyond comprehension. "The gems remain in secure storage during the loan term," Richard continued. "You receive the $75 million immediately. As I sell pieces, those proceeds go first to paying down the loan principal and accrued interest. Once the loan is satisfied, remaining sales proceeds come to you. If for some reason we can't sell enough to cover the loan within 5 years, unlikely given this collection's value, you have the option to extend the term or we negotiate other arrangements. And if I default, I keep the collateral and you keep the $75 million you've already received. No further obligation. But given the value here, default is extremely unlikely unless you do something extraordinarily foolish with the money." Richard's expression was serious. "Miss Chen, this is a standard arrangement for collections of this magnitude. I've done dozens of these deals. My reputation depends on handling them ethically and professionally. I'm not trying to cheat you. I'm offering you liquidity while managing the complex process of monetizing a fortune." Jennifer pulled out a contract, easily 50 pages, and set it on the desk. "Everything is documented here. I recommend you hire an independent attorney to review it before signing. This is a binding legal agreement with significant financial implications." Sarah looked at the contract, at the gems on the desk, at Richard and Jennifer watching her with professional patience. An attorney would cost money she didn't have, would take time she didn't have, would probably tell her to be cautious when caution meant staying poor. "I have 11 days before eviction. 6 weeks before I lose my job. $47,000 in medical debt. a 7-year-old daughter. Sarah met Richard's eyes. I don't need an attorney. I need this problem solved. Where do I sign? Richard studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I respect your urgency, but I want you to understand what you're agreeing to. Once you sign, the gems are my collateral. I control how and when they're sold. You'll receive regular reports on sales progress, but you don't get input into strategy or timing. If you disagree with my decisions, your only recourse is to pay back the loan in full plus accrued interest, which would require you to secure $75 million cash plus interest. I understand, and you accept that any undisclosed claims on this collection. If someone emerges saying your grandfather didn't have the right to hold these gems, if Myanmar's government files recovery action, if other heirs dispute the inheritance, those become your problem to resolve, not mine. The loan stands regardless of complications. I understand. Jennifer flipped through the contract, marking signature lines with small yellow tabs. Sign here, 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 initial here, here, and here. You're confirming the collateral description is accurate. You're affirming legal ownership. You're acknowledging the loan terms and interest rate. You're waiving certain rights to dispute the sales strategy, and you're accepting full liability for any legal challenges to the provenance. Sarah signed, over and over, her name in ink that felt permanent, binding, irrevocable. Each signature was a small surrender of control, a bet that Richard Castellano was exactly what he appeared to be, a professional businessman who dealt in extraordinary wealth and treated it as ordinary business. When the last signature was complete, Richard placed the contract in a folder and extended his hand. Congratulations, Miss Chen. I'll have my bank initiate the transfer tomorrow morning. You should see $75 million in your account by end of business day. In the meantime, I'm taking possession of the collection for secure storage. You'll receive a detailed inventory and storage receipt within 48 hours. Sarah shook his hand, watched him carefully pack each gem back into the wooden box, watched Jennifer photograph the entire collection one final time for records, watched them seal everything into a custom case with security locks and tamper evidence seals. Then she walked out of the office, took the elevator down to the lobby, walked to her car, sat behind the wheel, and burst into tears. Not sad tears, not happy tears exactly. Just the overwhelming emotional release of a crisis that had defined her entire adult life suddenly, violently ending. She wasn't poor anymore, wasn't drowning anymore, wasn't looking at her daughter's face and calculating which bill to pay this month and which to let go to collections. She was $75 million not poor. Sarah pulled out her phone with shaking hands and called her landlord. The woman answered on the third ring, her voice already carrying the weary irritation of someone who dealt with broke tenants begging for more time. This is Sarah Chen in Unit 3C. I'm calling about the back rent. Miss Chen, I've been very patient, but I can pay it. All of it. Today. The $5,400 plus late fees. And I'd like to pay 6 months in advance, if that's possible. Silence on the other end. Then, cautiously, you can pay. Yes. I'll transfer funds immediately. What's your bank information? After giving the landlord heart palpitations and securing their apartment for the next half year, Sarah called the hospital billing department and paid off all $47,000 in medical debt. The representative sounded shocked, kept asking if Sarah was sure, kept offering payment plans. Sarah just wanted it gone, wanted that weight lifted, wanted to never see another collections notice. Then she called her credit card companies and paid off the $8,000 she'd accumulated there. Called the payday loan place and paid off the $1,200 at 400% interest that had been slowly crushing her. Paid off every debt, every obligation, every chain that had bound her to poverty. By the time she picked up Emma from school, Sarah's bank balance showed $74,912,000, and she felt simultaneously giddy and terrified. Emma bounded to the car, and Sarah grabbed her in a hug that made her daughter squeak with surprise and laughter. Mom, you're squishing me. Sorry, baby. What could she say? I just became obscenely wealthy, and our lives will never be the same. I just love you so much. I love you too. Can we get ice cream? They got ice cream. The good kind, from the expensive place Emma always stared at wistfully, but they could never afford. Sarah ordered the largest size with all the toppings Emma wanted and didn't even look at the price. $30 for ice cream. She paid cash and didn't count the change. Emma ate her chocolate peanut butter monstrosity with pure joy, chocolate smeared across her face, completely unaware that their entire lives had just transformed. Sarah watched her daughter and thought about all the things she could finally give her. Good schools, college without debt, opportunities, options, futures plural, not just the singular narrow path poverty demanded. But she also thought about Richard's warnings, about people who'd come looking if they knew, about complications and claims and the dangerous attention extreme wealth attracted. Sarah pulled out her phone and texted Dr. Ewan. Deal is done. Thank you for everything. The response came quickly. Congratulations. Remember, discretion is survival. Tell no one. Sarah deleted the text thread, finished her ice cream, and drove home with her daughter chattering about her day, about the book she was reading, about completely normal 7-year-old concerns that had nothing to do with hundreds of millions in conflict gems. Their apartment looked the same when they walked in. Same cramped space, same worn furniture, same thin walls. But it felt different now. Not permanent, not imprisoning, just temporary housing until Sarah figured out what came next. Emma went to do homework. Sarah sat on the couch and finally let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. She'd walked into Dr. Ewan's office yesterday desperate and drowning. 48 hours later, she had more money than she'd ever imagined existed. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Sarah almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Miss Chen. The voice was male, accented, Chinese. My name is James Wei. I'm calling regarding your grandfather's estate. I understand he left you certain items that belong to my family. I'd very much like to discuss their return. Sarah's blood went cold. I don't know what you're talking about. The Mogok Prize. Your grandfather Henry Chen secured it during the war under my grandfather's authorization. But the gems were never his to keep. They belonged to the Wei family, held in trust for eventual return to Burma. I have documentation proving this. I'd like to arrange a meeting to discuss peaceful resolution. My grandfather's estate has been settled. If you have legal claims, contact his attorney. Miss Chun, please understand. I'm not threatening you. I'm offering you a way to avoid complications. The prize is worth a fortune, yes, but it also carries history and blood and claims from multiple parties. Keeping it will destroy your life. Let me help you navigate this properly. Sarah hung up. Her hands were shaking again, not from joy this time, but from fear. How did James Wei know? How had he found her? She'd only told Dr. Ewan, only met with Richard. 3 people knew about the gems. 3 people, and now someone else was calling, making claims threatening complications. The phone rang again. Same unknown number. Sarah answered, her voice hard. Stop calling me. Miss Chun, I'm trying to help. There are others who want the prize. People who won't be as polite as I'm being. You need protection. You need guidance. Please, just meet with me. One conversation. I said stop calling. Sarah blocked the number and turned off her phone entirely. She sat in the silence, heart racing, trying to think through panic. Richard had the gems now. They were in secure storage, protected, locked away. Even if James Wei or anyone else came for them, they couldn't access them without going through Richard's security systems. But they could access Sarah, could threaten her, pressure her, maybe even hurt her to get leverage. Emma's voice came from the bedroom. Mom, can you help me with this math problem? Sarah forced herself to breathe, to think clearly. She had $75 million in the bank. She could afford security, lawyers, professionals who handled these kinds of problems. First thing tomorrow, she'd hire protection. Find attorneys who specialized in disputed inheritance cases. Build walls around herself and Emma. Tonight, though, she just had to get through tonight. Sarah helped Emma with math homework, made dinner, went through the ordinary rituals of their evening routine. But her mind was elsewhere, running through scenarios, calculating risks, wondering what she'd actually signed away when she put her name on those contracts. After Emma was asleep, Sarah turned her phone back on. 7 missed calls, all from blocked numbers. 3 voicemails. She listened to the first one with dread. Miss Chun, this is Detective Lisa Grant with Seattle PD. We need to speak with you regarding your grandfather Henry Chen's estate. Please return this call as soon as possible. The second voicemail was from someone claiming to be a lawyer representing interested parties in the Mogok Prize matter. The third was James Way again, his voice more urgent. Please, Miss Chun, you don't understand the danger. Call me back before others find you. Sarah deleted all the voicemails and stared at her phone like it had become a weapon. 24 hours ago, she'd been nobody. Invisible. Just another struggling single mother in a city full of them. Now she was visible, exposed, a target painted on her back by wealth she'd barely begun to understand. She thought finding the gems solved her problems. Instead, she just traded one set of problems for another, infinitely more dangerous set. But at least now she had resources to fight back. Sarah pulled out Richard Castellano's business card and dialed his number. He answered on the second ring despite the late hour, his voice alert, professional. Miss Chun, I was expecting your call. You've started receiving contact, haven't you? How did you know? Because it always happens. Word spreads fast in certain circles. The moment I took possession of the prize, certain people were alerted. Not through any breach on my end. I have a reputation to protect. But gemstone dealers talk. Authentication requests get noticed. Security transfers leave traces. You can't move $289 million in gems without creating ripples. Sarah's throat was tight. What do I do? First, don't panic. This is manageable. Second, don't speak to anyone making claims on the collection. All communication goes through attorneys. Third, I'm sending you contact information for a security firm I work with. Call them first thing tomorrow, arrange protection. Fourth, get a lawyer. A good one, specializing in international asset disputes. I'll send recommendations. Richard, am I in danger? He paused, choosing words carefully. Define danger. Physical violence? Unlikely. These are business people, not criminals. But pressure, intimidation, legal harassment? Absolutely. You need to protect yourself, Miss Chun. The good news is you now have the resources to do so properly. Use them. After hanging up, Sarah sat in the dark living room, listening to Emma's soft breathing from the bedroom, trying to reconcile the joy of financial security with the terror of sudden visibility. She'd escaped poverty, but she was beginning to understand that wealth came with its own prisons, its own impossibilities, its own ways of drowning you. The only question was whether she was strong enough to survive what came next. Morning arrived with Seattle's perpetual gray, but Sarah was already awake. She hadn't slept. Every sound in the building had sent her heart racing. Footsteps in the hallway, doors closing, the building's ancient pipes groaning. Normal sounds transformed into threats when you suddenly had something worth taking. Emma woke at 7, oblivious to her mother's exhaustion. Sarah made breakfast with shaking hands, poured cereal and milk, watched her daughter eat while catastrophizing about everything that could go wrong. Mom, you look tired. Emma's observation was matter of fact, concerned without being scared. Are you sick again? The question hit harder than intended. Emma still associated her mother's exhaustion with cancer, with hospitals, with a year that had almost destroyed them both. Sarah forced a smile that probably didn't reach her eyes. No, baby, just didn't sleep well. I'm fine. After dropping Emma at school, watching her daughter disappear through those doors with acute awareness that someone might be watching, might be planning, Sarah drove directly to the law offices Richard had recommended. Chen and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise. The reception area was elegant, understated wealth, the kind of place that charged by the minute and made no apologies for it. Sarah gave her name to the receptionist and was ushered immediately into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. Michael Chun, no relation, he assured her when they shook hands, was maybe 45, dressed in a suit that cost more than Sarah's car had when she bought it. His handshake was firm, his expression serious, his manner suggesting he'd heard this story before and knew exactly how bad it could get. Richard Castellano briefed me on your situation. Michael gestured to a chair, and Sarah sat, grateful to be off legs that felt unsteady. You've inherited what is arguably one of the most valuable and contested gemstone collections in modern history. Multiple parties have claims or perceived claims on these stones. We need to establish a legal defense immediately. How many parties? Michael pulled out a folder, already thick with documents despite only being assembled overnight. So far, we've identified 6 separate claims. James Way, representing what he says is his family's interest as original owners. The Myanmar government, claiming national treasure status. 2 different collectors who say they purchased rights to the prize through various intermediaries over the years. A British museum claiming wartime seizure gives them legal ownership. And a class action group representing descendants of forced laborers in the Mogok mines, arguing the gems were extracted through exploitation. Sarah's vision tunneled. 6 lawsuits, 6 different attacks, all aimed at taking away the fortune she'd just discovered. Can they win? Some have better cases than others. Myanmar's claim is weak because your grandfather secured the gems under Allied military authorization during active combat operations. The wartime seizure rules are complex, but generally support your ownership. The forced labor claim is more concerning. If they can prove any of these specific stones were extracted under duress, it creates moral and potentially legal complications. Michael leaned forward, his expression intensifying. But here's what matters. Your grandfather's documentation is extraordinary. The contracts, the authentication certificates, the chain of custody records, they establish clear legal acquisition during authorized military operations. These weren't looted. They weren't stolen. They were secured as part of legitimate wartime resource control to prevent Japanese access. That's a strong foundation. So I keep them? Not quite that simple. Each claim has to be defended separately, which means multiple legal proceedings, probably spanning years. But yes, I believe we can successfully defend your ownership. The question is whether you have the resources and the stomach for prolonged legal warfare. Sarah thought about the $75 million in her bank account. I have resources. Good, because my retainer is $100,000. This case will likely cost several million before it's resolved. Richard is handling the gems liquidation, which gives you the cash flow to sustain the legal fight. But it's going to be brutal, Miss Chen. These people will investigate every aspect of your life, looking for leverage. They'll attack your grandfather's reputation. They'll question your fitness as an inheritor. They'll make your life extremely uncomfortable. I've survived worse. Sarah heard herself say it and realized it was true. She'd survived cancer, survived medical bankruptcy, survived raising a child alone while drowning in debt. She could survive lawyers. Michael smiled slightly. I believe you. Now, first priority is getting you protection. Physical security, not just legal. Some of these parties might attempt intimidation. Richard mentioned a security firm, Blackstone Security. I've already called them. They're sending someone to meet with you this afternoon. Former Secret Service, very professional, very discreet. Michael pulled out another document. In the meantime, I'm filing preemptive responses to all known claims and requesting restraining orders against direct contact with you. All communication goes through my office from now on. Nobody talks to you directly. Sarah signed more papers, authorizations, retainers, powers of attorney allowing Michael to act on her behalf in various legal proceedings. Each signature felt like adding armor, building walls between herself and the threats that had materialized overnight. When she left the law office 2 hours later, Sarah had spent $150,000, $100,000 retainer, plus $50,000 for various immediate legal filings, and felt simultaneously protected and exposed. The lawyers were a shield, but they also made everything official, documented, a matter of public record. People who searched legal databases could now see Sarah Chen was defending a massive inheritance. The invisibility she'd had for 32 years was gone completely. The security consultation happened at a coffee shop Sarah chose for its public nature and multiple exits. The man from Blackstone Security arrived precisely on time, dressed in casual business attire that didn't quite hide his military bearing. He introduced himself as Marcus Gray, former Secret Service, 20 years protecting high-value targets. Miss Chen. He didn't offer to shake hands, just sat across from her with eyes that never stopped scanning the environment. I've reviewed your situation. You need comprehensive protection, residential security, transportation, personal protection when in public, digital security for your communications and financial accounts. This isn't optional if you want to stay safe. How much? Full package runs about $50,000 monthly. That covers round-the-clock residential monitoring, a protection. Specialist assigned to you during any public exposure, secure transportation when needed, and digital security services. $50,000 a month. Sarah's previous life earned $19 an hour. This new life spent more in a month on security than she'd earned in almost 3 years. The math was dizzying. Do it. Marcus nodded like he'd expected this answer. I'll have a team in place by this evening. First priority is securing your current residence. You're in an apartment, correct? 3rd floor, limited access control? Yes, but I'm planning to move. That place isn't safe anymore. Good instinct. I'll send you listings for secure buildings. High-rises with controlled access, security staff, camera coverage. Plan on spending $8,000 to $10,000 monthly for appropriate housing in Seattle. Another enormous number. Sarah just nodded. Money had ceased meaning anything normal. It was just a tool now, something to deploy to solve problems. What about my daughter? She's 7, goes to public school. Marcus's expression softened slightly. That's the biggest vulnerability. Public school means predictable schedule, multiple access points, lots of strangers around. I recommend private school with controlled campus access, security staff, and limited public information about students. I can provide recommendations. Private school, another expense, but this one Sarah didn't even hesitate over. Emma's safety was non-negotiable. They spent another hour discussing specifics. Marcus would have a protection specialist shadow Sarah whenever she left her apartment. Her car, her ancient Honda with its dying transmission, will be replaced with something reliable and equipped with security features. Her phone would get encrypted communication apps. Her bank accounts would get additional authentication protocols. One more thing, Marcus said as they stood to leave. Expect surveillance. Some of these parties claiming the gems might hire private investigators to follow you, photograph you, document your daily routine. They're looking for leverage or evidence of unfitness. Live your life normally, but assume someone is always watching. The word sent ice down Sarah's spine. Someone always watching. Her invisible poverty life had been difficult, but at least private. This new wealth came with an audience she never wanted. Sarah picked up Emma from school, hyper-aware of every car in the parking lot, every person near the playground. Her daughter bounced into the passenger seat, completely oblivious to her mother's paranoia. Mom, guess what? Miss Peterson said I'm reading at a 5th grade level. She wants me to join the advanced reading group. Sarah grabbed her daughter's hand, squeezed it hard enough that Emma looked at her with surprise. Baby, how would you feel about switching schools? Somewhere new, somewhere with smaller classes and more attention? Emma's face fell. But all my friends are at this school. I know, but we can afford something better now. You make new friends, better opportunities. Did you get a new job? Sarah had been dreading this question, hadn't figured out how to explain sudden wealth to a 7-year-old without creating more problems. Grandfather left me some money, more than I expected, enough that things are going to be different for us. Different how? Different like better apartment, better school, not worrying about rent or food. Different like we're going to be okay now, really okay. Emma processed this with 7-year-old logic. So we're rich, we're comfortable, and we're going to be smart about it. Can we get a dog? The question was so normal, so childishly perfect, that Sarah actually laughed. Yeah, baby, we can get a dog. They spent the evening looking at apartments online. Sarah's criteria had transformed overnight. Doorman building, security cameras, controlled access, parking garage. The places that met these requirements cost more monthly than her previous year's rent, but money wasn't the constraint anymore. Safety was. She found a 2-bedroom in a new high-rise in South Lake Union. Secure building, 24-hour concierge, camera coverage on every floor, parking garage with controlled access. $9,500 monthly, available immediately. Sarah filled out the application, provided bank statements that made the leasing agent's eyes widen, and was approved within 2 hours. They could move in next week. Emma was excited about the new apartment, about her own bedroom finally, about the building's rooftop garden and the gym, and the fact that there was a Whole Foods in the ground floor. She chattered about furniture and decoration and whether they could paint her room purple. Sarah listened and responded and tried not to think about the 6 lawsuits, the surveillance, the threats that were circling like sharks smelling blood. Marcus's team arrived at 8 p.m. For people, all professional, all carrying equipment. They installed motion sensors on the doors and windows, placed cameras covering the hallway approach, upgraded the door locks to commercial grade, and gave Sarah a panic button that would summon immediate response if pressed. "You're secure for now," Marcus said after his team finished. "Starting tomorrow, whenever you leave this building, call me first. I'll have someone positioned to provide escort." After they left, Sarah sat on her couch with Emma asleep in the bedroom and stared at the panic button sitting on the coffee table. This was her life now. Security teams, lawyers, threats, legal battles, all because her grandfather had kept a secret for 70 years and left her to deal with the consequences. Her phone rang. Michael Chen, calling at 10 p.m. because apparently lawyers in this tax bracket didn't sleep either. "Sarah, we have a problem. James Way filed an injunction attempting to freeze your assets until ownership of the gems is resolved. He's arguing that you're dissipating potential settlement funds by spending lavishly." Sarah's stomach dropped. "Can he do that?" "He tried. I got it dismissed an hour ago because the gems are already collateralized to Richard Castellano, so you're not dissipating that asset. And your spending, legal fees, security, appropriate housing, is reasonable given your situation. But it's an indication of how aggressive they're going to be." "What do I do?" "Document everything. Every expense, every decision, every communication. They're going to paint you as a greedy heir spending money that morally belongs to others. We counter by showing every dollar goes to legitimate needs or fighting their illegitimate claims. You're not living lavishly. You're protecting yourself from their harassment." After hanging up, Sarah pulled out her laptop and created a spreadsheet. Every expense logged, categorized, justified. Rent, security, legal fees, moving costs, Emma's school. All of it documented with obsessive precision. If they wanted to call her spending unreasonable, she'd bury them in evidence proving otherwise. The weekend passed in a blur of moving preparations and escalating legal notices. Michael called Saturday morning with news that Myanmar's government had filed official papers claiming national treasure status. Called again Saturday afternoon, saying the British Museum had gone public with their claim, releasing a statement to the press about rightful ownership of wartime-acquired cultural artifacts. "They're trying to pressure you through public opinion," Michael explained, "making this about colonialism and stolen heritage. We'll file responses, but expect media attention." Media attention. Sarah's anonymity was evaporating completely. Sunday morning, Sarah woke to her face on the front page of the Seattle Times. Well, not exactly her face. A photograph taken from her old Facebook profile, the last photo where she'd looked healthy before cancer, smiling at someone's barbecue years ago. The headline read, "Seattle woman inherits $289 million gem collection, faces international ownership dispute." The article was comprehensive, detailed, sourced from leaks Sarah couldn't identify. It described the Mogok Prize's history, her grandfather's role in securing it, the various claims against her ownership. It included quotes from James Way talking about moral obligations and historical justice, quotes from the British Museum about proper stewardship of cultural artifacts, quotes from Myanmar officials about treasure stolen during colonial oppression. No quotes from Sarah, because nobody had asked her. She was just the accidental inheritor, the medical billing clerk who'd stumbled into a fortune and now faced international controversy. Her phone exploded with calls. Reporters wanting statements. Distant relatives she hadn't heard from in years suddenly concerned about her welfare. People claiming to be friends from high school asking if she needed help managing her new wealth. Everyone suddenly interested in Sarah Chen now that Sarah Chen had something worth taking. She turned off her phone and sat in silence, feeling the walls closing in. This was what visibility meant at this level. Complete loss of privacy. Every decision scrutinized. Every action interpreted through the lens of the controversy surrounding her. Emma found her sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. "Mom, are you okay?" Sarah pulled her daughter close. "Yeah, baby. Just a lot happening. The article says people are mad at you. You saw it. Mrs. Rodriguez showed me. She wanted to make sure I knew people might ask questions at school." Emma's voice was small. "Are you in trouble?" "No. People just want something I have, and they're trying to make it seem like I don't deserve it. But it's okay. We have good lawyers. What if they take it away?" Sarah held Emma tighter. "Then we survive anyway. We've survived worse than being rich, remember? If it all disappeared tomorrow, we'd still have each other. That's what matters." Emma was quiet for a moment. "I liked it better when we were invisible." "Me too, baby. Me too." Monday morning, Sarah took Emma to tour the private school Marcus had recommended. Lakeside Academy, progressive education, small classes, extremely selective enrollment. The campus was beautiful. Old trees, brick buildings, gardens where kids worked on outdoor science projects. The tuition was $42,000 annually, a number that would have been impossible a week ago, but was now just another expense to document. The admissions director, a woman named Patricia with kind eyes and perfect posture, gave them a tour while subtly assessing Emma. "We have space in our second grade program starting next Monday. I understand you're looking for immediate enrollment?" "Yes. Our situation has changed recently. We need somewhere secure." Patricia's expression suggested she'd read the newspaper. "We take students' safety very seriously. All visitors must check in. Campus access is controlled, and we have strict policies about media contact with students." Emma charmed the director by reading aloud from a fourth-grade book and explaining the plot with sophisticated vocabulary. They were accepted before leaving the building. "Your daughter is exceptionally bright," Patricia said as they walked to the parking lot. "She'll thrive here. And Miss Chen," she paused, "many of our families deal with various forms of public attention. You're not alone in navigating complicated circumstances. We're very protective of our community's privacy." Sarah felt tears threatening for the first time since this nightmare began. Someone was being kind without agenda. "Thank you." That afternoon, they moved into the new apartment. Sarah had hired movers despite having almost nothing worth moving. Their old furniture was cheap and worn, barely worth the effort. But the movers came anyway, professional and efficient, transferring their humble possessions to a luxury apartment where they looked absurd and out of place. Emma ran from room to room, delighted by the space, by her own bedroom, by windows that overlooked the city. Sarah stood in the living room and felt disconnected from everything. This wasn't her life. This was someone else's life she'd accidentally stepped into, wearing clothes that didn't fit, trying to pretend she belonged. Marcus came by to inspect the security setup. The building had excellent baseline security, but he added additional measures to their specific unit. Reinforced locks, camera covering their door, upgraded alarm system connected directly to his monitoring service. "You're as safe as you can be in an urban environment," he said after finishing. "But Sarah, I need to tell you something. We detected surveillance yesterday. 2 different teams following you at various points. One was definitely private investigators, probably hired by James Way based on their methods. The other team was more concerning, professional, expensive, not clearly connected to any of the known claimants." Sarah's mouth went dry. "What does that mean?" "It means someone else is interested. Someone with resources and sophistication who hasn't revealed themselves yet. Could be another collector. Could be criminal organization interested in the gems. Could be government intelligence, though that seems unlikely. The point is, they're watching and we don't know what they want." "What do I do?" "Exactly what you're doing. Stay visible, stay legal, stay surrounded by professionals. They're looking for opportunity to pressure you quietly. Don't give them one. After Marcus left, Sarah stood at her new floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at Seattle's skyline and felt like a prisoner in a luxury cage. She had $74 million in the bank. She'd moved from poverty to wealth in 5 days, and she'd never felt less safe in her entire life. Emma's voice came from her new bedroom. "Mom, can you help me put up these posters?" Sarah turned away from the window, away from whatever unseen watchers might be out there, and focused on her daughter. Emma wanted posters hung. Normal. Request. Normal activity. She could handle normal. They spent the evening making Emma's room feel like home. Purple paint would have to wait for landlord approval, but they covered the walls with posters of Emma's favorite books and artists. Set up her small bookshelf in the corner. Arranged her stuffed animals on the new bed Sarah had ordered. The first new furniture Emma had ever had in her life. "It's perfect," Emma said, standing in the doorway admiring their work. "Can we get a dog now?" Sarah laughed, the first genuine laughter since finding the gems. "Let's survive this week first, then we'll talk about dogs." Tuesday morning, Emma started at Lakeside Academy. Sarah walked her to the classroom, watching her daughter's nervous excitement, the way she clutched her new backpack with white knuckles. The other children came from wealth. You could see it in their casual confidence, their expensive casual clothes, the way they moved through space like it belonged to them. Emma was an outsider here, new money in an old money world. But the teacher was warm, the classroom was bright and engaging, and Emma relaxed visibly when another girl invited her to see the class hermit crab. Sarah left feeling cautiously hopeful. The protection specialist Marcus assigned to her, a woman named Angela, former military, calm and competent, followed Sarah to her next appointment, meeting with Richard Castellano about the first sale from the collection. Richard's San Francisco office was even more impressive than his Seattle space. Corner suite, 30th floor, views of the Bay Bridge. He greeted Sarah with professional warmth that somehow never quite reached actual friendliness. "I made the first sale," he announced after they sat down. One of the smaller sapphires, exceptional color, to a private collector in Singapore. Sold for $4. $2 million. After expenses and my commission, that's $3. $7 million toward your loan principal. Sarah tried to process this. One stone, $4. $2 million. The wooden box had contained hundreds. The numbers were incomprehensible. At this pace, Richard continued, "I estimate we'll have your loan fully repaid within 30 months. After that, remaining sales are pure profit to you. You're looking at approximately $200 million net after all fees and expenses delivered over the next 4 years. 4 years of legal warfare. 4 years of living in the public eye. 4 years of surveillance and threats and managing Emma's childhood in the middle of international controversy." Sarah wasn't sure she could survive it. "Have you heard from any of the claimants?" Richard asked. "Just to my lawyer. Michael Chen handles all direct communication." "Good. Maintain that boundary absolutely. These people will try to guilt you, pressure you, make personal appeals. Don't engage." Richard leaned forward. "Sarah, I've been doing this for 25 years. I've handled disputed estates, contested inheritances, complicated family situations. This case is unusual in magnitude, but not in kind. You have strong legal standing. You will win if you stay the course. And if I don't, if I fold, give them what they want. Then you lose everything. The vultures will pick the carcass clean, fighting among themselves over which piece they're entitled to. You'll end up with nothing except the satisfaction of having been pressured into surrender. Is that what you want?" Sarah thought about Emma in her new school, finally having opportunities. Thought about medical debt that was gone, eviction notices that were history, poverty that was finally, definitively ended. Thought about her grandfather spending 70 years protecting this treasure so his family wouldn't have to suffer what he'd suffered. "No, I'm fighting." "Good." Richard smiled, the expression carrying approval. "Now, I need to warn you about something. James Way has been making inquiries about purchasing the collection directly from me. He's offering $100 million, immediate payment, for me to breach our contract and sell him the gems." Sarah's heart stopped. "What did you say?" "I said no, obviously. Our contract, is binding. I don't breach contracts, particularly not for people like James Way who think money can buy anything. But it tells you how serious he is. He's willing to spend $100 million to acquire the prize, which means his claim isn't just about historical justice. There's something else driving him. What? That's what we need to find out. After leaving Richard's office, Sarah sat in the car with Angela driving them back to Seattle and tried to sort through the tangled mess of motivations and claims. Everyone wanted the gems, but why? The monetary value alone didn't explain the intensity. James Way offering $100 million to breach contract. Myanmar's government making official diplomatic claims. The British Museum going public. The mysterious second surveillance team. What was she missing? Back at the apartment, Sarah found a package waiting at the concierge desk. Plain brown box, no return address. Addressed to her in handwritten block letters. Angela examined it with professional suspicion. Don't open this until I've checked it. She took the box to a corner of the lobby, used some kind of scanner Sarah didn't recognize, then carefully opened it herself. Inside was a single item wrapped in tissue paper. A photograph. Old, black and white, edges worn. The same photograph that had been in her grandfather's metal box. Him and the white woman with shovels at the Mogok mine entrance. But this wasn't a copy. This was a different shot from the same day, showing more people. 7 figures total, posed in front of the mine, all holding tools, all looking exhausted but determined. On the back, in different handwriting than her grandfather's, a message. They all died for the prize except Henry. Ask yourself why. Angela brought the photo to Sarah, her expression grim. This is a threat. Someone researched your grandfather's history, found this image, delivered it to make you afraid. Sarah stared at the photograph. 7 people. Only her grandfather had survived. The words echoed. Ask yourself why. I need to research my grandfather's worst service. Sarah looked at Angela. Can you help me find military records? That's not really my expertise, but I know people. Give me a day. That evening, while Emma did homework and chattered about her new school, the hermit crab's name was Sheldon. She made a friend named Maya. The art room was amazing. Sarah Googled her grandfather's name plus variations of Burma, World War II, and Mogok. She found more than expected. Several academic articles about Allied operations in Burma during Japanese occupation. Mentions of intelligence teams securing valuable resources to prevent enemy access. One article specifically referenced Henry Chen's unit and something called Operation Brilliant Stone. Sarah clicked deeper, finding a digitized military history document from 1945. It detailed a covert operation to secure the Mogok ruby mines before Japanese forces could fully exploit them. The operation involved a joint American-British intelligence team working with local Burmese resistance. They'd secured a significant quantity of high-value gems and successfully transported them to Allied-controlled territory. The operation had been successful but costly. Of the 7-person team, only one survived to complete the mission, Sergeant Henry Chen. Sarah's grandfather had been the sole survivor of Operation Brilliant Stone. Everyone else had died securing the prize. And now, 70 years later, someone wanted her to know that history. Wanted her to understand the blood that soaked these stones. But why? What did it change? Her grandfather had risked his life, seen his comrades die, and completed the mission. That didn't diminish his right to keep what he'd secured. If anything, it strengthened his claim. Unless the message meant something else. Unless the deaths weren't combat casualties, but something darker. Sarah's phone rang. Michael Chen, voice tight with controlled urgency. We have a major development. James Way's lawyers just filed new evidence in his claim. Documents purportedly from your grandfather's personal effects. Letters written during the war, describing how the gems were secured. Sarah, these letters claim the operation went wrong. That the team wasn't killed in combat, but in a dispute over the prize. That your grandfather killed them. The words hit like a sledgehammer. Sarah couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what Michael was saying. They're accusing him of murdering his team? Not directly. The letters don't explicitly say he killed them. But they describe paranoia, arguments over what to do with the gems, people dying under suspicious circumstances. It's enough to create doubt about the legitimacy of his claim. If they can prove the gems were secured through criminal activity rather than authorized military operation, your ownership becomes questionable. Those letters are fake. Maybe. Probably. But we need to prove it, which means expert authentication, handwriting analysis, historical verification. That takes time, and in the meantime, the public narrative is shifting. You're no longer the sympathetic inheritor. You're potentially the granddaughter of a war criminal. Sarah looked at Emma, innocently working on math problems at the kitchen table, oblivious to everything. Her daughter deserved better than this. Deserved a mother who wasn't fighting accusations of descended from murderer's shame. Michael, what do I do? Fight. We're filing motions to exclude the letters as unverified and potentially falsified. We're demanding chain of custody documentation for where we got them. We're hiring our own experts to examine them. But Sarah, this is going to get worse before it gets better. The media is going to crucify your grandfather's reputation. You need to be ready. Sarah hung up and sat in silence, the photograph of her grandfather and his doomed team lying on the coffee table. 7 people. 6 died. 1 survived and kept a fortune. The story practically wrote itself. Greedy soldier kills comrades, steals treasure, hides it for 70 years. But her grandfather hadn't been greedy. He'd lived modestly, died with almost nothing, left her only the gems and the burden of protecting them. That wasn't the behavior of a man consumed by wealth. There had to be more to the story. Emma looked up from her homework. Mom, you look sad again. Sarah forced a smile. Just adult stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. Is it about great-grandfather? Yeah, baby. Some people are saying not nice things about him. Emma's face scrunched with 7-year-old outrage. That's mean. He was nice. He gave me candy. He was nice. And the things they're saying aren't true. We're going to prove it. But how? How did you prove a negative? How did you establish innocence when the accused had been dead for a month and couldn't defend himself? The answer came from an unexpected source. Angela called her the next morning with news. I found someone who knew your grandfather. Colonel Robert Mitchell, retired Army, 94 years old, living in a care facility in Tacoma. He served in Burma, same region, same time frame. He remembers Operation Brilliant Stone. He's willing to talk. Sarah was in her car within an hour, Angela driving, headed south to Tacoma. The care facility was nice, upscale, well-maintained, the kind of place you ended up when you'd saved wisely and planned ahead. Colonel Mitchell sat in the common room, ancient and shrunken, but with eyes that were still sharp, still present. Miss Chen. His voice was thin but clear. Angela said you wanted to discuss your grandfather. Henry Chen, good man. Saved my life once. Sarah sat across from him, a recorder on the table between them with his permission. Colonel Mitchell, people are claiming my grandfather did something terrible during the war. They're saying he killed his team to keep the Mogok prize. I need to know the truth. Mitchell's laugh was bitter. That's what they're saying now. 70 years later, when everyone who knew the truth is dead or too old to matter. He shook his head. Your grandfather was a hero, Miss Chen. What happened to Operation Brilliant Stone was tragedy, not murder. What had happened? The team secured the gems successfully. They were transporting them to our base when they were ambushed by Japanese forces. It was a massacre. Everyone killed except Henry because he'd been on reconnaissance, scouting the route ahead. He heard the gunfire, circled back, found everyone dead, and had to make a choice. Try to retrieve the bodies and lose the gems, or complete the mission and leave his friends behind. Mitchell's eyes were distant, seeing something 70 years past. He chose the mission, came back alone with the prize. Some officers wanted to pin the deaths on him, because otherwise they had to admit their intelligence failure led to the ambush. Henry refused to defend himself, said accusing him was easier than admitting they'd sent good people into a trap. He accepted the whispers and suspicion because he knew the team wouldn't have wanted their deaths to be meaningless. Sarah's throat was tight. Why didn't he ever tell anyone the truth? Because truth doesn't matter to people who've already decided you're guilty. And because your grandfather was a proud man. He didn't need validation from people who question his honor. He just lived his life, kept the gems as the prize his team died to secure, and waited until they mattered more than his reputation. Which is now? Which is now? Mitchell leaned forward. Miss Chen, those gems cost 6 lives. Your grandfather spent 70 years being their guardian, protecting them from people who'd misuse them. Now that burden is yours. Don't let it be for nothing. Don't let the vultures win. Sarah left the care facility with the recording and something more. Valuable clarity. Her grandfather hadn't been perfect, but he'd been honorable. He'd made hard choices in impossible situations, and he'd trusted her to continue what he'd started. Michael filed Colonel Mitchell's testimony with the court the next day, along with declassified military records supporting his version of events. The response was swift. James Way's lawyers attacked Mitchell's credibility. He was 94, potentially confused, loyal to a fellow soldier. The letters they produced seemed more reliable than an old man's convenient memories. But other evidence was emerging. The letters James Way had filed were being examined by forensic document experts. The paper tested wrong for 1944, containing materials not available until the 1960s. The ink was modern ballpoint, not period-appropriate fountain pen. The handwriting was skilled forgery, but ultimately detectable as fake. Someone had manufactured evidence to destroy Henry Chen's reputation. Someone desperate enough to commit fraud, which meant they knew their legitimate claims were weak. We're filing criminal complaints, Michael told Sarah during their emergency meeting. Whoever created those letters committed fraud, perjury, and potentially witness tampering. The investigation will take time, but it shifts the narrative. You're not the morally questionable inheritor anymore. You're the victim of a coordinated attack by people trying to steal your legitimate inheritance. The media narrative did shift, but not as cleanly as Sarah hoped. Some outlets reported the fraud. Others doubled down on suspicion, suggesting the forgeries might be fake, but the underlying story could still be true. Public opinion was divided, some sympathetic to Sarah's situation, others convinced wealth had corrupted both grandfather and granddaughter. Sarah stopped reading comments, stopped watching news coverage, focused only on what she could control. Emma's stability, her legal defense, the careful documentation of her life to prove she wasn't the monster some wanted her to be. Emma adapted to Lakeside Academy with remarkable resilience. She made friends, excelled in classes, came home chattering about science projects and literature discussions, and the wonder of having teachers who actually paid attention. The school held its boundaries firmly. No media access, no discussions with outsiders about students, no tolerance for disruption. Weeks passed. Legal motions accumulated. Depositions were scheduled and conducted. Expert witnesses were retained. Sarah's life became a rhythm of legal conferences, security briefings, Emma's school events, and the surreal experience of watching her bank balance grow as Richard sold gems one by one. Another $8 million from 3 sapphires, $12 million from a matched pair of exceptional rubies, $6 million from a rare star sapphire. Each sale meant another chunk of the loan paid down, another step toward the $200 million net profit Richard had projected. But it also meant renewed attention, renewed pressure, renewed threats from people who believed the money should be theirs. The mysterious second surveillance team was eventually identified. Private security working for the British Museum, gathering evidence to support their claim that the gems qualified as cultural property removed during colonial operations. They were professional, non-threatening, just watching and documenting. Sarah almost found their presence reassuring. Better the watchers you knew about than the ones operating in shadow. 3 months after finding the gems, Sarah sat in Michael's office reviewing their legal position. 5 of the 6 original claims had been dismissed or withdrawn. Myanmar's government claim was defeated by the wartime authorization documents. The British Museum withdrew when their own historians confirmed the gems were secured under legitimate military operations, not colonial theft. The forced labor class action fell apart when no specific evidence connected these particular stones to exploitation. 2 collector claims were dismissed as fraudulent, based on forged purchase documents. Only James Way's claim remained, and it was crumbling. The forged letters had been definitively proven fake. His family's historical ownership claim was contradicted by period documents showing the gems had been ownerless, secured from abandoned mines during Japanese retreat. He had no legitimate basis, just determination and apparently unlimited resources for legal harassment. "We're close," Michael said. "Another 2 months, maybe 3, and we'll have final judgment in our favor. After that, you're clear. No claims, no challenges, no threats to your ownership." Wei faces criminal charges for the forgery if we can prove he knew the letters were fake. At minimum, he'll pay your legal fees as sanction for frivolous litigation. At maximum, prison time. Sarah should have felt victorious. Instead, she just felt tired. 3 months of legal warfare, constant vigilance, living under scrutiny. She'd aged years in that time, but Emma was thriving. Sarah's bank balance showed $48 million, the loan almost half paid. Their life was stable, secure, better than Sarah had ever imagined possible. They'd survived. The final hearing happened on a Thursday in June, Seattle summer finally breaking through perpetual gray. Sarah sat in the courtroom with Michael beside her, Angela positioned discreetly in the back, Emma safely at school, unaware that today would determine their future. James Way sat across the aisle with his lawyers, expression carefully neutral. He was maybe 50, well-dressed, carrying himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to winning. But his eyes betrayed worry. He knew how weak his position was. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Patricia Wong, Chinese-American like Sarah, reviewed the case with thorough attention. She'd clearly read every filing, examined every piece of evidence, considered every argument. When she finally spoke, her voice carried authority that made the courtroom fall silent. "This case has required extraordinary consideration. The collection known as the Mogot Prize carries significant historical and monetary value. Multiple parties have claimed ownership or interest. The court's responsibility is to determine legitimate rights under applicable law." Judge Wong looked directly at Sarah. "Miss Chen, your grandfather Henry Chen participated in Operation Brilliant Stone, a classified military operation during World War II. He was the sole survivor of a team that secured the Mogot Prize under proper military authorization. Declassified documents confirm this operation was legal, authorized, and successfully executed despite tragic casualties." She turned to James Way. "Mr. Way, your claim that your family held prior ownership has been contradicted by historical records. The mines from which these gems were extracted had been abandoned during Japanese occupation. No clear ownership existed at the time of Allied operations. Your submission of forged documents to support false claims has been proven. Your litigation has been found to be in bad faith, pursued despite knowledge that no legitimate basis existed." Judge Wong's expression hardened. "Therefore, this court rules in favor of Sarah Chen. The Mogot Prize is her legitimate inheritance from her grandfather Henry Chen, who secured it under lawful military operations and held it legally for 70 years. All claims against Miss Chen's ownership are dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Way is ordered to pay Miss Chen's legal fees, currently totaling $2.3 million, within 90 days. The gavel came down. Final, definitive, done. Sarah sat motionless, unable to process that it was actually over. Michael squeezed her shoulder. "You won. It's finished." James Way stood abruptly and left without looking at her, his lawyers trailing behind. The courtroom emptied quickly, people eager to share news of the verdict, to discuss implications, to move on to next cases. Sarah remained seated, feeling the weight of 3 months lift off her shoulders. Emma was safe. Their future was secure. The gems were legitimately hers. Nobody could take that away now. Outside the courthouse, media waited. Sarah gave a brief statement Michael had prepared. "I'm grateful for the court's thorough consideration of this complex case. My grandfather served his country honorably and secured the Mogot Prize under proper authority. I'm honored to carry forward his legacy by using the proceeds to support education and opportunities for my daughter and others. Thank you." Short, dignified, ending the story on her terms rather than letting others define it. Angela drove them away from the courthouse, away from the cameras, back to their apartment in South Lake Union. Sarah called Emma's school and asked them to let her daughter know she'd be picked up early today. Good news? Patricia, the admissions director, asked, clearly aware of the hearing. The best news. Sarah collected Emma from her classroom, watching her daughter gather her backpack and say goodbye to friends with the casual ease of a child who belonged. They drove to the waterfront, found a park with views of Elliott Bay and the Olympic Mountains beyond. Is it over? Emma asked as they sat on a bench eating ice cream Sarah had bought from a vendor. The court stuff? It's over. We won. The money is really ours. Nobody can take it away. Emma processed this with 7-year-old pragmatism. Does this mean we can get a dog now? Sarah laughed, the sound startling a nearby seagull. Yes, baby. We can absolutely get a dog now. They spent the afternoon looking at animal shelter websites, Emma debating the merits of various rescue dogs, Sarah just enjoying her daughter's happiness and the knowledge that they'd survived something that should have destroyed them. That evening, after Emma was asleep with adoption applications printed and spread across her bed, Sarah stood at their floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at Seattle's lights. The city that had almost crushed her with poverty had become their home in a different way. Not because it was easy, but because they'd fought for their place here and won. Her phone rang. Richard Castellano, calling from San Francisco. I heard about the judgment. Congratulations. Thank you. For everything. You made this possible. I provided a service you paid well for. But Sarah, I'm calling about next steps. Now that ownership is definitively established, we can accelerate sales. I estimate we can complete liquidation of the remaining collection within 18 months rather than the original 4-year timeline. You'd receive your final proceeds faster. Sarah thought about having $200 million within 2 years instead of 4. About closing this chapter of her life sooner. About Emma growing up with stability instead of ongoing drama. Do it. Sell it all as quickly as reasonable. I don't want to spend years looking over my shoulder. Understood. I'll adjust the strategy. Expect larger payouts more frequently. By this time next year, you should be completely clear of the loan and receiving pure profit distributions. After hanging up, Sarah pulled out her laptop and opened the spreadsheet she'd maintained obsessively. Every expense documented, every decision justified, every dollar accounted for. She'd spent $8, $7 million in 3 months, security, lawyers, housing, Emma's school, therapy bills because surviving trauma required professional help, charitable donations because she refused to be the person who kept everything while others suffered. $8, $7 million spent, $48 million remaining, and approximately $180 million more coming over the next year as Richard sold the rest of the collection. Sarah closed the laptop and allowed herself to feel what she'd been suppressing for 3 months. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated happiness that she'd protected her daughter, honored her grandfather's legacy, and survived people who wanted to destroy her. The wolves had come for her. She fought them off. She'd won. 3 weeks later, Sarah and Emma adopted a rescue dog named Bailey, a golden retriever mix with 3 legs and the most optimistic personality Sarah had ever encountered. Emma loved him instantly, completely, the way only children could love. Bailey slept on Emma's bed, followed her everywhere, brought toys to Sarah with hopeful eyes that suggested maybe she needed to play fetch more than she thought she did. Life developed new rhythms. Emma's school, Bailey's walks, therapy sessions where Sarah processed everything, legal debriefings that became less frequent as the case truly ended. Gradually, the surveillance stopped. The threats ceased. The media moved on to other stories, other scandals, other people whose lives were more interesting than a single mother who'd inherited a fortune and fought to keep it. Sarah established a foundation using a portion of the proceeds, focusing on medical debt relief for cancer patients and educational scholarships for children of veterans. Her grandfather had secured the prize to prevent it from being lost to enemy forces. Sarah would honor that sacrifice by ensuring his fortune helped people who needed it, people like who she'd been 3 months ago, desperate, drowning, needing someone to believe they deserve better. 6 months after the final judgment, Richard called with news that the last gems had sold. The collection is fully liquidated. Final accounting shows $287 million in total sales, which after my commission, storage fees, insurance, and various expenses, nets you $214 million beyond what you've already received. I'm transferring the balance today. Sarah checked her account that evening and saw the number, $267,143,089. $267 million. More money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. More security than she'd ever imagined possible. The complete transformation from poverty to wealth, accomplished in less than a year. Emma found her mother sitting on the couch, staring at her phone, Bailey's head in her lap. "Mom, are you okay?" Sarah pulled her daughter close. "Yeah, baby. I'm better than okay. We're set. Forever. You can go to any college you want. You can do anything you want. The struggle is over. Can we still live here? I like my school. We can live anywhere you want." Emma thought about this seriously. "I like it here. My friends are here. Bailey likes the rooftop garden. Can we just stay?" Sarah laughed and kissed her daughter's head. "Yeah, baby. We can just stay." And they did. Not because they couldn't afford better, but because better wasn't about money. It was about Emma's friends and Bailey's favorite park, and the therapist Sarah had finally found who helped her process trauma without judgment. It was about the Foundation's first scholarship recipient, a brilliant kid from a military family who got to attend college debt-free because Sarah's grandfather had survived a war and kept a secret for 70 years. It was about taking the broken metal box her grandfather left her and transforming its hidden contents from a burden into a blessing. 2 years after finding the gems, Sarah stood in her grandfather's cemetery on the anniversary of his death. She'd never visited before, too poor to afford flowers, too busy surviving to grieve properly. But now she could. She placed jade orchids at his headstone, the expensive kind that would last, and stood in silence with Emma beside her and Bailey sitting patiently. "Did you know him well?" Emma asked. "Not really. He was always kind but distant. I don't think he let people close." "Why not?" Sarah thought about the photograph of 7 people at a mine entrance, 6 of whom died. About the weight her grandfather had carried alone for 70 years. About secrets that couldn't be shared without destroying the people who held them. Because he was protecting something, and sometimes protection means loneliness. Emma didn't fully understand, but she would someday. When she was older, Sarah would tell her the full story. About the Mogok Prize and Operation Brilliant Stone and the grandfather who secured a fortune in blood and kept it hidden until desperation made it necessary. But for now, Emma was 9 years old and worried about 4th grade and whether Bailey needed a friend. Normal concerns, appropriate concerns, the kind of childhood Sarah could finally provide because her grandfather had looked at a broken metal box and seen possibility. Sarah touched the headstone, cool marble under her fingers. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for surviving, for waiting, for trusting me to be strong enough." The wind moved through the cemetery trees, carrying the scent of cut grass and distant rain. Sarah took Emma's hand, and they walked back to their car, Bailey trotting beside them. 3 lives transformed by a secret that almost destroyed them, but ultimately saved them instead. The metal box sat in a safety deposit box now, empty of gems, but full of documents Sarah couldn't bring herself to discard. The photograph of her grandfather and his doomed team. The contracts proving legitimate acquisition. The letter warning her about wolves. She visited it sometimes, touching the corroded metal, remembering the moment she discovered the false bottom and everything changed. The box was broken, but that was okay. Broken things could still be valuable, could still save lives, could still matter. Sarah had learned that lesson from her grandfather. And someday, when Emma was ready, she'd pass it forward again. The broken box that held a fortune. The desperate woman who fought for it. The daughter who got to grow up safe. 3 generations connected by gemstones and secrets and a refusal to surrender when wolves came calling. That was their story, and it ended not in tragedy, but in triumph. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.